Emily Harper's mornings always began the same way. She would rise early, fix breakfast for her son Ryan, and get him ready for school. The house was quiet except for the sound of plates clinking and Ryan's small footsteps running across the hallway. On the surface, life looked ordinary, but beneath it all, Emily carried the weight of loss that had never left her. Her husband had passed away 3 years ago, and though she smiled for her son, inside, she still felt broken. Every morning she put on her brave face, making sure Ryan saw a strong mother, not the fragile woman who cried herself to sleep some nights. Her days followed a rhythm that felt safe but empty. After dropping Ryan off at school, she would drive home, open her laptop, and work remotely as a graphic designer. She had talent, and her clients praised her designs, yet none of it filled the quiet of the house. There were no more good morning kisses, no warm voice asking about her day, no one waiting at the dinner table except Ryan. She loved her son deeply, but the silence after he went to bed was heavy. It was in those hours that loneliness pressed hardest on her chest. Ryan, only 10 years old, was brighter than most children his age. He noticed things Emily thought she had hidden. He noticed when she wore the same sweater too many times, when her eyes looked puffy from crying, and when she sat staring at old photo frames on the mantel. He didn't ask questions, but he carried a quiet wish in his heart, that his mother could be happy again. Sometimes he would draw pictures at school of a family with 3 people, handing them to Emily as if they were just innocent sketches. But she understood the longing behind them. Emily's friends had told her many times, "You're still young, you deserve love again." But every time she heard those words, guilt pricked her heart. She couldn't imagine opening herself to someone new. What if Ryan didn't understand? What if it felt like replacing her husband's memory? So instead, she chose safety. She chose routines that never changed. She chose to keep her world small, with no room for surprises. Still, something inside her was restless. She had started noticing the little cracks in her walls. She would pause at the mirror longer than before, wondering when she had stopped caring about her own reflection. Her hair was always tied back in the same bun, her clothes chosen more for comfort than beauty. She could hardly remember the last time she dressed up for herself. It wasn't that she didn't want to, she simply felt she had no reason to anymore. But one Friday evening, something unusual stirred in her. Ryan had been invited to a sleepover at a friend's house. Emily would have the evening to herself, something that rarely happened. At first, she thought of ordering pizza, watching a movie, and going to bed early. But as she stood in front of her closet, she froze. Her eyes landed on a dress she hadn't worn in years, a simple navy blue dress her husband once said made her look radiant. She touched the fabric gently, and memories flooded back. She hesitated, but then she thought, why not? Just for me. She pulled the dress out and held it against her body, looking into the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked uncertain, but curious. She began changing out of her old sweater and jeans, slipping into the dress. The fabric hugged her differently. Now. Time had changed her figure, but there was still a softness, still a quiet beauty. She brushed her hair out of its usual bun, letting it fall around her shoulders. When she applied a touch of lipstick, even she was startled by the transformation. For the first time in years, Emily felt alive, like she had woken up from a long sleep. She wasn't dressing for anyone else. She wasn't trying to impress. She was simply reminding herself that she was still here, still capable of beauty, still a woman beyond the roles of mother and widow. She twirled slightly in front of the mirror and laughed, surprised at how light she felt. At that exact moment, Ryan walked in. He had forgotten his backpack and ran upstairs without knocking, only to stop in his tracks when he saw his mother. His eyes widened, and he stood frozen in the doorway. Emily gasped, quickly reaching for her sweater to cover herself, embarrassed by his sudden entrance. But before she could say anything, Ryan blurted out the words that would stay with her forever. "Mom, you look happy again." Emily's hand paused on the sweater. She turned slowly to face him, her heart racing. The words were simple, but the way he said them pierced straight through her. She had expected laughter, or confusion, or maybe a playful comment about her looking different. Instead, her son had noticed something deeper, something she hadn't realized was shining through her eyes. Ryan gave a shy smile, as if he wasn't sure if he had said the right thing. Then, with the innocence only a child could have, he added, "I like it when you smile like that. You should do it more." He grabbed his backpack and ran out before Emily could reply, leaving her standing alone in front of the mirror, her heart trembling. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection. His words echoed over and over. "You look happy again." She hadn't thought of happiness as something she could wear, something that could slip across her face like light after a storm. Yet Ryan had seen it in a single glance. She touched her cheek as though trying to feel the happiness he spoke of. For years, she had believed that part of her life was gone forever. But her son had seen something she didn't believe she still carried. A spark. A possibility. That night, Emily didn't watch a movie. She didn't hide in the quiet of the house. Instead, she left the dress on, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat by the window watching the stars. For the first time in a long time, she let herself dream. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. Her son had given her permission to hope again. And in that fragile hope, something inside her began to change. The next morning, Emily woke up with Ryan's words still circling in her head. "You look happy again." It was such a small sentence, yet it felt like someone had opened a locked window inside her chest. She moved through her routine, making breakfast, packing Ryan's lunch, reminding him to grab his jacket. But everything felt slightly different. She kept catching herself glancing at the mirror, wondering if the happiness he saw was still there. On the way to school, Ryan sat in the passenger seat humming a tune, unaware of the weight his words carried. Emily kept looking at him, wanting to say something, but she held back. Children had a way of saying truths adults often ignored, and she didn't want to spoil it by over-explaining. Still, as she watched him run toward the school doors, she thought, maybe he sees something I can't. When she returned home, her laptop sat open on the dining table, filled with unfinished design work. Normally, she would have gone straight into her projects, but today she hesitated. Instead, she walked to her closet and pulled out the navy blue dress again. She didn't put it on, just held it in her hands. For years, it had been tucked away like a secret, a reminder of a life she thought she could never revisit. Now, it felt like an invitation. Her phone buzzed with a message from her friend Claire. "Lunch today? My treat. You need a break." Normally, Emily would have politely declined, giving some excuse about deadlines. But today, she typed back quickly, "Yes. Pick me up at noon." She surprised even herself. At lunch, Claire noticed immediately. "Wow, Em, you look different. Did you do something new with your hair?" Emily laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not really. Maybe I just let it down for once." Claire studied her for a moment, then leaned forward. "No, it's more than that. You look lighter, happier, the same word again, happy, twice in 2 days." Emily's cheeks warmed, and she found herself confessing about the dress, about how Ryan had seen her and what he said. Claire listened, her eyes soft. "That boy is wiser than he knows," Claire said gently. "He sees you better than you see yourself. Maybe it's time you start seeing what he sees." Emily stirred her coffee, letting the thought sink in. It wasn't about the dress, not really. It was about the fact that Ryan had noticed her smile. She realized she hadn't thought of herself as a woman who could smile like that in a long time. That afternoon, back at home, Emily sat by the window with her sketch pad. She hadn't drawn for pleasure in years. Her art had become only work. But something inside pushed her to pick up her pencil. Her hand moved without planning, sketching the outline of a woman looking into a mirror, her reflection brighter than she believed herself to be. It was simple, yet it captured what she felt. The hidden glow she didn't know was still alive. When Ryan came home later, he noticed the drawing on the table. "That's you, isn't it?" he asked, pointing at the sketch. Emily smiled. "Maybe, what do you think?" Ryan studied it carefully, then nodded. "It looks like you when you're not sad. I like it." His honesty pierced her again, but this time it didn't hurt. It stirred something hopeful. She ruffled his hair and laughed. "Well, then I'll try to look like that more often." That night, after Ryan went to bed, Emily sat alone with a box she hadn't touched in years. It was filled with old photographs, letters, and keepsakes from her late husband. For a long time, she had avoided it, afraid that opening it would undo her. But now, she approached it differently. She wasn't looking for pain. She was searching for strength. She held a photo of herself and her husband at a summer festival, both of them laughing. She stared at her own face, remembering how carefree she had once been. She whispered to the picture, "I don't want to forget you, but I think Ryan's right. I need to find that smile again." It felt strange, almost like asking permission, but it also felt freeing. For the first time, she understood that moving forward didn't mean leaving the past behind. It meant carrying it differently. The weekend came quickly, and Claire invited Emily and Ryan to a small community fair. At first, Emily hesitated, but Ryan's excitement made her agree. The fair was buzzing with families, music, and food stalls. Ryan ran ahead toward the games, leaving Emily and Claire to wander. Emily noticed people around her, mothers, couples, friends laughing together. For years, she had kept her world small, avoiding places like this. Now, walking among the crowd, she felt something awaken. She wasn't invisible. She was still part of life, still capable of belonging. While Ryan played a ring toss game, Emily stood nearby, and a man about her age came up beside her. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and a gentle presence. "Your son's got a good aim," he said casually. Emily blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, yes. He's determined," she replied, a little nervous. The man chuckled. "Reminds me of my nephew. He'd spend all day at these games if I let him." He extended his hand. "I'm Daniel, by the way." Emily hesitated only a second before shaking his hand. Emily. They spoke only briefly, but it was enough to leave Emily unsettled in a good way. She hadn't expected a stranger's smile to warm her, hadn't expected to enjoy a conversation that simple. As Ryan tugged her hand, eager to show his prizes, she glanced back once and found Daniel still watching her with a polite nod before turning away. That evening, Ryan fell asleep quickly after the excitement of the fair, but Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake, replaying the day. Her son's laughter, her friend's support, the unexpected encounter. She realized her world was shifting, little by little, in ways she couldn't deny. For the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped in her routine. She felt a door cracking open, a chance she hadn't considered before. Ryan had been right. There was still happiness waiting for her, if she had the courage to reach for it. As she drifted off to sleep, one thought stayed with her. Maybe life is giving me a second chance. The following week passed with the same routine: breakfast, school runs, client work, laundry. But Emily felt a quiet shift in everything she did. It wasn't dramatic, but it was steady. When she brushed her hair in the morning, she no longer tied it up quickly just to get through the day. Instead, she left it down sometimes, remembering how she had felt in the navy dress. When she cooked dinner, she hummed softly to herself without realizing it. Even Ryan noticed the difference. One night, as he bit into his sandwich, he looked at her and grinned. "You've been smiling a lot lately, Mom." His innocent observation made Emily's heart swell. She didn't know how to explain that it wasn't one thing. It was everything. Ryan's words, Claire's encouragement, the drawing she had made, the fair, and yes, even that small moment with Daniel. It was all weaving together into something new, something she hadn't dared to hope for, the possibility of change. Still, part of her was cautious. She told herself not to read too much into that brief conversation with Daniel. He was just a kind stranger she happened to meet. Yet, as the days went on, she found herself remembering his warm smile, the ease of his voice, the way he had stood with his hands tucked in his jacket like he wasn't rushing to be anywhere else. She hadn't felt that kind of awareness in years, and it both unsettled and excited her. The following Saturday, Claire suggested they visit the local farmer's market. Ryan loved the stalls of fresh fruit and baked goods, so Emily agreed. The morning was bright, and the streets were filled with laughter and chatter. As they walked through rows of colorful produce, Emily felt lighter than she had in a long time. Then, as if fate had been listening, she heard a familiar voice. "Emily?" She turned, startled, and there was Daniel, holding a bag of apples. His expression carried genuine surprise, followed by a smile that felt disarming in its warmth. "Daniel," she said, her voice catching slightly, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I live nearby," he replied. "This market's my weekend ritual." He glanced at Ryan, who was busy eyeing a basket of muffins. "And this must be your son?" Emily nodded. "Yes, this is Ryan." Daniel crouched slightly to Ryan's level, offering a kind smile. "Nice to meet you, Ryan. Looks like you've got good taste. Those muffins are the best in town." Ryan gave a shy grin before tugging at Emily's sleeve, whispering, "Can we get some?" Emily laughed softly. "We'll see." Then she looked back at Daniel. "It's funny, running into you twice in a week." "Maybe it's not an accident," he said lightly, his tone teasing but gentle. The words stayed with her long after they parted. Daniel didn't linger, just exchanged a few pleasantries before heading off. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was nudging her. Twice in 2 weeks, 2 encounters that stirred something she thought had been buried forever. That evening, after Ryan was in bed, Emily sat by the window again. She thought about her late husband, about the years she had spent hiding from life, and about Daniel's easy smile. She felt guilty for even letting her heart skip in his presence, but another voice whispered that it wasn't betrayal, it was being alive. Days passed, and Emily went about her life, but small changes began to appear. She started walking with Ryan after dinner, enjoying the fresh air instead of staying cooped inside. She baked muffins with him one Sunday, laughing when they spilled flour everywhere. She even put on a touch of lipstick before picking Ryan up from school. Not for anyone else, but because she liked how it made her feel. Then, one afternoon as they strolled through the park, Ryan suddenly asked, "Mom, do you ever get lonely?" The question caught her off guard. She stopped walking, looking down at him. His wide eyes were full of innocence, but also curiosity. "Sometimes," she admitted softly. "Why do you ask?" Ryan shrugged. "Because when you smile, you don't look lonely. I like it better when you smile." Emily knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're very smart, you know that?" He grinned. "I just want you to be happy." Her throat tightened. "You make me happy, Ryan. More than you know." But his words lingered. "Do you ever get lonely?" They echoed inside her as if someone else had asked. The truth was yes, she did get lonely. She had buried that loneliness under routines, under the excuse of being busy, but it had never gone away. She wondered if Ryan had always known. The next week, she saw Daniel again. This time it was at the library. Ryan was scanning through adventure books while Emily waited by the shelves. Daniel appeared at the end of the aisle, holding a stack of novels. "Emily," he greeted, his face lighting up. "We keep running into each other." She laughed, a little nervous. "Yes, it seems like it." They talked for a while, nothing too personal, just about books, the town, and Ryan's love for stories. Yet even in those small exchanges, Emily felt a pull she couldn't deny. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't overwhelming, it was gentle, like the slow return of spring after winter. When she got home that evening, Emily stood in front of the mirror again. She thought about how Daniel had looked at her. Not with pity, not as if she were fragile, but as if she were simply herself. She realized she had missed being seen that way. Not as a widow, not only as a mother, but as Emily. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what it might mean to open her heart again. The thought scared her, but it also thrilled her. Ryan's words had planted a seed, and Daniel's presence was watering it slowly. As she tucked Ryan into bed that night, he smiled sleepily and whispered, "You're smiling more these days." Emily kissed his forehead, her heart full. "That's because you remind me to." But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Something was changing inside her, and for once, she wasn't afraid. Emily woke the next morning with her mind racing. The image of Daniel at the library lingered, not because of anything extraordinary he had said, but because of how ordinary it all felt. For years, she had built her life around silence and caution. Now, a simple conversation about books had shaken that silence in ways she couldn't explain. She tried to push the thought away as she prepared Ryan's breakfast, but it followed her through every task. Ryan, as always, was quick to notice. "Mom, why do you keep smiling at nothing?" he asked, raising his eyebrows while buttering his toast. Emily laughed and shook her head. "Maybe I just feel good today," Ryan grinned. "Then you should feel good every day." The words struck her. Children had a way of saying things without knowing their weight. Emily thought about how many days she had spent surviving instead of living. Maybe it was time to change that, for herself and for Ryan. Later that week, Claire invited Emily over for coffee. As they sat in Claire's cozy kitchen, Emily finally confessed what she had been feeling. She told her about running into Daniel, about how he seemed kind, about the small spark that unsettled her. Claire listened, then leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Emily, it's okay to feel this way. It doesn't mean you're forgetting your husband. It just means your heart is ready for something new. Ryan deserves to see you happy, and you deserve to be happy too." Emily stirred her coffee slowly, letting her friend's words settle. She had been so afraid of moving on, as if it meant betrayal. But Claire was right. Love didn't erase the past, it built on it. The very next day, fate intervened again. Emily took Ryan to the park, and there was Daniel, jogging along the path. He stopped when he saw them, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Emily, what a nice surprise," he said, catching his breath. Ryan ran ahead toward the swings, leaving them standing together. Emily felt her heart race, but she managed to smile back. "Seems like we keep running into each other," Daniel chuckled. "Maybe the universe is trying to tell us something." For a moment they just stood there, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. Emily felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She could keep her world small, safe, predictable, or she could open the door, even just a little, and see where it might lead. Daniel must have sensed her hesitation because his tone softened. "Listen, I don't want to overstep, but would you maybe like to get coffee sometime? Just as friends?" The invitation hung in the air. Emily's first instinct was to say no, to retreat to safety, but then she glanced at Ryan, laughing on the swing, his face bright and carefree. She remembered his words. "You look happy again." She drew in a steady breath. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that." Daniel's smile widened, not triumphant, but grateful. "Great, no pressure, just coffee." When they parted ways, Emily felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She hadn't said yes to anyone in years. That night, as she tucked Ryan into bed, he looked at her with sleepy eyes. "You seem lighter, Mom," he murmured. Emily kissed his forehead gently. "Maybe that's because I'm finally ready to be." The following week, Emily met Daniel at a small cafe downtown. She almost didn't go. Her hands trembled as she buttoned her coat, and doubt whispered in her ear. But she pushed through, reminding herself that it was just coffee, nothing more. When she walked into the cafe, Daniel was already there, waving her over. His presence put her at ease immediately. Their conversation flowed easily, covering everything from books to childhood memories to their favorite places in town. He asked about her work, about Ryan, but never pressed too hard. Emily found herself laughing more than she had in years, her shoulders relaxing as if she had been carrying an invisible weight all this time. As they said goodbye, Daniel looked at her with sincerity. "Thank you for saying yes. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed a conversation like this." Emily smiled, her heart trembling in a way that felt both terrifying and wonderful. "Me too." Over the next few weeks, they saw each other again, sometimes by accident at the park or the market, sometimes by choice over coffee. Emily noticed how natural it felt, how Daniel never pushed her to move faster than she was ready. He respected her space, but he also reminded her what it felt like to be seen, to be valued beyond her role as a mother or widow. One evening, after Ryan had gone to bed, Emily sat by the window with her sketch pad again. She began to draw, her pencil moving quickly across the page. This time, she sketched not just herself, but a scene of 3 figures walking side by side, a woman, a child, and a man. She stared at it for a long moment, her chest tight with emotion. For years, she had closed her heart to the possibility of love. Now she realized the door was opening slowly, gently, but undeniably. She thought of Ryan's quiet wish for her happiness, of Claire's encouragement, and of Daniel's kindness. Maybe this was what second chances looked like, not grand, not rushed, but tender and patient. Emily set her pencil down and whispered into the quiet room, "Maybe I am ready." The words felt like a promise to herself, a step she had been too afraid to take until now. For the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel like she was only surviving. She felt like she was beginning to live again. And though she didn't know where the path with Daniel would lead, she knew one thing for certain. Happiness was no longer a distant memory. It was here, waiting if she dared to hold it. The following week was unlike any Emily had lived in years. For the first time, she noticed how much her days were no longer only about survival. She wasn't just going through motions, she was paying attention. The way the morning light fell on her kitchen table, the sound of Ryan's laughter drifting from his room, the little compliments her clients gave her about her work. It all began to feel alive again. Yet beneath that new energy, a quiet storm was building inside her. Daniel had become more than just a stranger she bumped into. Their conversations at the market, the library, and even casual greetings on the street had formed something real. He wasn't pushy. He didn't intrude. He simply showed up with kindness, offering her the kind of presence that felt safe. But that safety was exactly what scared Emily. For 3 years, she had built walls to protect herself and her son. Now, piece by piece, those walls were falling, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to see what stood on the other side. One evening, as she folded laundry, Ryan walked into the room holding a drawing. "I made this for you," he said proudly. Emily took the paper and felt her chest tighten. Ryan had drawn the 2 of them standing in front of their house, but this time there was a third figure. A man with dark hair standing beside Emily, holding her hand. She looked down at her son, her voice barely steady. "Ryan, who is this?" He shrugged innocently. "It's you, and me, and someone who makes you smile. I don't know his name yet." Her heart trembled. Children had a way of cutting through to the truth. Emily wanted to laugh it off, but she couldn't. She hugged Ryan tightly, whispering, "You want me to smile, don't you?" Ryan nodded against her shoulder. "Yeah, I think Dad would want that too." Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She kissed Ryan's hair and held him longer than usual. That night, after putting him to bed, she sat at her window again, the dress still hanging in her closet like a reminder. She thought about her husband, the love they shared, the life they built, the loss that nearly destroyed her. But she also thought about Ryan's words, about the man at the fair with kind eyes, and about her own reflection smiling back at her. The next morning, Emily decided to stop hiding. She put on a soft sweater, brushed her hair down, and applied a touch of lipstick, not for anyone else, but because it made her feel strong. She walked Ryan to school, and on the way back she passed the park. Daniel was there, jogging with his dog. He noticed her immediately, slowing down with a smile. "Emily," he said, a little breathless. "Good morning," she smiled back, surprised at how natural it felt. "Morning, Daniel." He leaned on the bench, catching his breath. "I was hoping I'd run into you again." Emily hesitated. She could walk away, keep her walls up, or she could stay. She chose to stay. They talked for a while, about his work as a teacher, about her design projects, about their favorite books. It was simple conversation, yet Emily felt a warmth spreading through her, the kind she hadn't felt in years. When she finally stood to leave, Daniel said softly, "I'd like to see you again. Maybe coffee? Only if you're comfortable." Her heart raced. She thought of Ryan, of her late husband, of the fear that always lingered. But she also thought of the boy who drew a picture with 3 people and said he wanted her to smile. She nodded slowly. Coffee sounds nice. The days that followed were filled with cautious steps. Emily met Daniel at a small cafe, the kind of place where the air smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. They talked for hours, not about dramatic things, but about life, about small joys, about hope. Emily laughed more than she expected. She noticed how Daniel never pushed, never tried to fill the silence with anything other than kindness. For the first time in years, she didn't feel judged or pitied. She simply felt seen. At home, Ryan began asking about Daniel casually. Is he nice? Does he like dogs? Does he like muffins? Emily answered each question with honesty. She realized her son wasn't afraid. He was curious, maybe even excited. One evening, as the sun set, Emily stood outside her house after Daniel had dropped her off. She looked up at the sky, streaked with pink and gold, and realized something. She wasn't carrying only grief anymore. She was carrying possibility. Her heart still held the love she had lost, but now it also held the courage to love again. Weeks later, Emily took Ryan to the park, and Daniel joined them. They played catch, shared ice cream, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. At one point, Ryan looked up at Emily, his eyes bright. You look happy again, Mom, he said softly. Emily felt tears gather, but this time they were tears of joy. She knelt down, pulling her son into her arms. That's because you showed me how. Ryan smiled, glancing at Daniel. I think he helped too. Emily laughed through her tears, nodding. Yes, maybe he did. As they walked home together, Emily held Ryan's hand in one and felt Daniel's steady presence beside her. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the future. She was ready for it. The woman who once hid behind routines and grief was gone. In her place stood someone new, still tender, still healing, but no longer broken. Emily had found her smile again, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. She looked at her son, at Daniel, at the evening sky, and whispered to herself, "This is the beginning." And it was.